Way to save the season, the throw, fire, and down! Incomplete down at the goal line by San Diego! Tomlinson, off the left side, Tomlinson sidestep. Hello, history books. I think they have to now. Here's Sproles. Sproles inside the 10, inside the 5, and the Chargers win the game.
What's up, good people? Shout out to IB Psych in the chat who wanted to take the over-under if we'd make it on time. It's a push, exactly 4:30, so nobody wins here. Thanks to Lightning Round Podcast. But this was just because of you in the chat who said, I wonder if there'll be the over-under if they make it on time. So here we go. I hope somebody took some action because we're here on time. And we're here to talk about running backs. Maybe some moves happen while we're talking. If they are, make sure to put them in the chat. Thanks for joining us, everybody, on this Sunday night. Craig, Jamie here with us, and we're going to go and talk about 4 running backs. We've got kind of the consensus 4-ish, and then we'll each give our own sleepers. And I think we could just jump right into it, Jamie, if you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Anything else you want to add before we start? Anybody else?
Just thank you for our friend. What's his name? IB
Psych, maybe?
IB Psych for giving us the motivation to be here on time. We appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you for your contribution.
Yeah. And Kim already commented on the new do. Craig?
What'd I do?
It's under the hat.
Oh, I mean, nothing under there. It's bold. Nothing new about that. She's talking about the beard.
I think maybe she thought it looked shorter. I don't know. Anyway.
I trimmed it a little bit, you know.
Oh, that's a good moment. All right, cool. So I know what we do. Craig, you always remind us. Thank you. Because now I'm doing it. Make sure you subscribe, everybody. Get on that YouTube. Make sure you're notified when we go live. Go join the Patreon, the Discord. Go do all that. Follow us on Twitter. You guys know what to do. You know where it's all at. If you're watching this now, make sure you subscribe because we're going to be going live with a lot more content. So now let's get into it. And we're going to talk about 4 running backs. And the first one on this list is going to be the Texas running back. It's going to be Jonathan Brooks. We'll each kind of talk about each running back, and then we'll kind of talk about fits for the Chargers. So, Jamie, fill us in on what you saw from Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah, so Brooks is a guy who is in the consensus top 4. I think he's a guy who a lot of people have as RB1. I think mostly because of his speed. He does have explosive speed. There's a really nice jump cut that he has and a little stutter step that he'll make guys miss in the hole. The burst through the hole is really good. He has a speed to outrun pursuit angles at the second level. I mean, he pretty much, for the most part, will erase. Excuse me, sorry. Bet you guys appreciate hearing that sneeze on the mic. Anyway.
Bless you.
Thank you for telling us how you really feel about Brooks.
I was muted, yeah.
Well, that would have been vomiting, but anyway. No, but he does have the speed to erase angles at the second level. Which is fun to watch. The second gear in the open field is legit. Once he gets to that second or third level and he turns on the jets, he's pretty tough to run down. He's pretty willing as a pass protector. I wouldn't say he's great at it, but he gets the job done. The hands are really good. He's effective in the screen game, in the swing game. He'll run some occasional routes. Very natural receiver, and he's really good at making guys miss after the catch. So he's a guy who can create yak opportunities. All really fun things to watch. I think as you start really digging deep into him, I think there are some things, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time because I think this is going to sound redundant to a certain extent as we get into more and more of these guys, just as a heads up. But I think, in my opinion, I don't know how you guys felt. I felt like Brooks really lacks vision. Like if the hole doesn't just crater in front of him and there isn't a massive hole right there, he's going to stutter step, his feet are going to stop, and he's probably not going to get much. There isn't a whole lot of willingness to put his head down and run into the pile to just take what the defense is giving him. The feet stop way too often, in my opinion. The change of direction thing, while he has a good jump cut and a stutter step to freeze guys in the hole, once he gets through the hole and he hits that second gear, there's really no change of direction for Brooks. He's pretty much a one direction downhill runner once he makes that initial cut, which generally leads to him running to contact at the second and third levels. He's not making people miss. The other thing that I didn't really care for with him is the contact balance is awful. He plays at 210-ish, I think. He never runs through a tackle. If you get a hand on his knee, on his thigh, on his arm, on his ankle, dude's going down 9 times out of 10. There is just no real fight or desire to run through tackles or to finish runs, in my opinion. I think the blocking technique needs some work. He definitely lacks the ability to string moves together in the open field. And the toolbox is just limited to the jump cut and stutter step. I really wanted to see him finish more runs. I really wanted to see him exhibit some of that vision between the tackles where he can just kind of slip through a crack and find himself 3 or 4 yards, even if the hole isn't necessarily there. And I didn't really see much of that. So I know there are people who are excited about him. I am not so much. My grade on him, and I think you guys are going to find my running back grades this week were not very generous. But I'm at a 73 on Brooks.
A 73?
73, which
Okay.
is a late third round pick. I just think he can catch the ball. He's explosive. He has the ability to create big plays, which is fun. But I think there are too many limitations to his game in terms of the physicality and the contact balance and the willingness to finish plays that I just didn't care for. So 73 for me for Jonathan Brooks. What did you guys see?
Craig?
Yeah, Jamie, you're going to be the one this week. I can tell. So you're ready to wear the crown. I don't know, Garrett.
I don't think he is. I don't think he is.
Cool. All good. So
I think today's my day.
all right, awesome. Well, maybe I'm a little biased because this is the position that started me in football. I played running back all the way up until my sophomore year of high school before I converted over to wide receiver. So special place in my heart. But I think I see Brooks a little bit differently than you do, Jamie. I don't love his game altogether, but there's some things that I definitely see that he can improve upon. One thing is that he had to sit behind Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson at Texas. So he didn't have a really large sample size to be able to see. And then he had the late season injury. So this was his first real year to shine. But in a class that doesn't boast many cats with decent contact balance, I think I probably saw it most consistently from Brooks from the game that I watched. Not great, but it was there. He's not completely devoid of it. I think he carries his weight really well and has movement skills to match it for a guy that's nearly 220 pounds. I would say he's more of a smooth runner and under control running style, and he can really kind of like lull defenders to sleep, and he'll force them to take really poor angles when in one-on-one open field situations. And because he also understands pad level, he has like a keen feel for lowering his center of gravity just prior to contact. So he gains like kind of that low man wins leverage for like an extra 2 yards or so when he's finishing off runs. The footwork is actually pretty decent from what I saw. His change of direction skill is not elite, but he does possess some. I think it's serviceable. And he actually he's forced missed tackles at a rate of 1 every 3 touches. So while he isn't necessarily a big guy in breaking tackles, he does make guys miss in the open field, ironically enough. In short areas, he's pretty crafty, I would say, as a runner, which kind of speaks a little bit more to what I said about him lulling defenders asleep in the open field. He'll make defenders take like a second guess at how they want to attack him. So basically meaning like you can see a guy coming downhill at him and he'll give him a dead leg early on and he'll set him up later for something else. If they're afraid to commit, what they'll do is like give ground and try to either force him to the inside to support or to the sideline, which adds like an additional couple yards to the back end of those runs that he doesn't necessarily have to earn. It's just that he's gotten defenders so afraid at what he could do that they don't necessarily want to look like fools in the open field and miss on him and whiff. So they might just be willing to give up 2 or 3 extra yards to ensure that he doesn't break a big one. So those are kind of the things that I think that he does well. To me, he is not an overly explosive back. He has good speed for a back. I wouldn't call it elite by any means. He's good at pressing gaps and bursting through them, but I don't see elite long speed. I would say he probably tops out speed-wise somewhere around like 15 to 20 yards. And he's more of a glider and probably more suited for like a zone scheme. I don't think the versatility to run like gap is there. I don't see it with him. And like he'll hesitate, like you mentioned, Jamie, sorry. He'll hesitate in congested areas and stop his feet while he's waiting for like daylight to open up instead of just attacking and lowering his pads and accepting like the 2 yards and moving on to the next play. He's always just waiting for something to develop that sometimes never does. So that kind of speaks to his he doesn't have enough feel for the position at this point. And maybe that's because he doesn't have enough live game reps, but he's still, you can tell, like learning. So he's really so much in the really at the front end of his running back career, still figuring out the position. His hands are fine, but there's not a whole lot to speak of as a receiver. I think they use him primarily like as an outlet guy in the passing game. And I don't know what he is in protection at this point. I think I saw maybe like 4 reps in pass pro, and they range from just like okay to yuck. The torn ACL near the end of the year is, it hurts his stock right now. So he's probably going to drop. So it's an investment that you're going to have to wait to see pay dividends. So maybe, you get him late 2024 and you don't see the 100% of him until early next season. But I don't like Brooks as much as I guess the consensus does, but I don't think I disliked him as much as Jamie. Believe it or not, I gave him a 79. So I gave him a high 3rd round pick. I'm sorry. Yeah. High 3rd round grade, should I say.
Yeah. So I'm definitely more in Jamie's camp. I think the contact balance and the vision are his biggest issues. I think when you talk about a zone blocking scheme, I think that's probably going to be his best suited role in the NFL. I think he's got to be just a cut and go type runner. And I get it. I mean, I know that he was behind 2 pretty good running backs last year and didn't really get his shine. But this season, I mean, I don't know. Also, like as a power runner, we haven't really talked about like his power. He doesn't possess much of that at all. But the contact balance really concerns me, and the vision I feel like is not good enough. And so I have a 72 on him, which is lower than Jamie. But I feel like Jamie was talking about how we're probably going to be talking a lot, saying the same things a lot about this class of running backs. But we were going back and forth on text, but contact balance is a thing we're going to talk about with, I feel like, every single one of these running backs coming up. And this is one of those that just can't run through an arm tackle and doesn't possess much power. His vision isn't all that good. That's why he's choppy behind line of scrimmage. I do feel like when he gets in the open field at the second level, he's got enough wiggle to get past defenders, but at the line of scrimmage, when there's all that trash in the middle, I feel like he just has an issue getting past the line of scrimmage. So with that kind of average acceleration, I could see how teams could view his ceiling, knowing that, it was kind of, early on in his career, and there are some traits there that you could build on that you think maybe in a year or 2 he might be able to cash in on. But right now, coming into the league, I don't know how you can put him for anything more than maybe a RB2 at best. He's probably rotational RB3 right now, going into 2023. So that's kind of where I'm at with Brooks. So I'm just below Jamie, and Jamie thought he was being rude with him.
Well, too soon.
I think you guys got your turn. I think today's my turn. All right, so let's move on to Craig. Jaylen Wright.
All right, so one of the guys that the Chargers have expressed some interest in. Wright's tape was fun, particularly just this past season, because you got to see him go up against some really stout competition in the SEC. We know that's kind of the bar to measure some of the best athletes in the sport in college football at. Those who can really excel against that level of competition are the ones that tend to get the most shine. Where Wright is really fun is that he has elite burst and top end speed, like not just great like freaky elite top end speed. He ran a 4.38 in Indy, but the truth is, it's kind of an undersell on how good his long speed really is. I mentioned this before. You watch competitions against SEC teams and you see him pulling away from defenders at the second level in the SEC. And I mean, like, they don't have a shot. Once if he gets even, you've heard the phrase corny, if he's even, he's leaving. This is that type of guy. There's no one who's catching him or running him down from behind because, I mean, like I mentioned before, the 40-yard dash, it's cool when you watch it at Indy and you see him run sub 4.4, but the truth of the matter is he doesn't really get going until around like the 20 to 25-yard mark. Then he really opens it up. So he's got like 100-meter track speed. Nobody in his class can really sniff it. I think he's a fit for both zone and gap due to the one-cut ability, but also like the type of force he can generate behind his pass due to his speed, I think makes him really good in power schemes as well, because you can kind of maneuver through trash, converting like speed to power and then going back to speed once he explodes through the hole. He isn't just a home run hitter. I saw a more patient runner in 2023 on tape than I did in 22. So he now more so allows holes to develop and he'll manipulate blocks. Plus he has the ability to get skinny, increases and explode on the other side. So he understands tempo as a runner. Last year, I think he was all about just trying to take it to the house with every touch. This year, he showed the ability to kind of read his blocks a little bit better and wait for them to develop before, he really press the gas all the way down. But also, he's not an overly agile back, but he does boast a really lethal jump cut. And he has, I will say, even though the contact balance isn't great, I think it's above average. So again, the bar for contact balance here is really low this year, but when they're not completely devoid of it, I want to give him props. He averaged over 7 yards per carry last year. Again, he did this in the SEC, so keep all that in mind. Pretty decent chops as a receiver. He had like right around 40 receptions between 2022 and 23. I would say he's actually one of the things that not a lot of backs boast coming out of college. Are being decent in BPU, blitz pickup, or pass pro, whichever you prefer to call it. This gives him a bit of an advantage in the class, I would say, going to the next level and being a guy that's going to be ready like day one, because he's not going to be a complete liability there. You see a lot of guys struggle their first year because they're not able to pick up blitzes. They don't know how to read them. They don't understand how to absorb the contact. They don't know how to drop their hips and explode into the guy to help create a stalemate. They catch blocks, and sometimes they get destroyed, and the quarterback gets like bombed for it. But I don't think you're going to have that problem with Wright because he's a willing blocker, and his technique is actually pretty decent. I think the only thing – no. Hold on, sorry. The other thing is he doesn't have a whole lot of tread on his tires. I think he was in a bit of a committee years prior, but this last year, he was more the dominant back in Tennessee, but they still had a pretty wide open passing game. So they allowed him to operate in space, but they didn't really decide to just hand him the ball over and over and over again and allow him to just burn himself out. So they kept him relatively fresh this year, even though he's the big name back there. Some of the things that I am a little concerned about, he's a really upright runner. So he's susceptible to fumbling. He put 4 on the carpet his sophomore year. He cleaned it up here last year. So I think he just had 1. So that still needs to be shored up. In the NFL, teams are going to take advantage of that. So it's not just about grip strength on the ball. It's about how exposed it is. And when you're more of an upright runner, you're going to have to make sure that you're practicing ball security every time you touch it, because there's just more surface area to attack. I don't think he has great vision. It's questionable. He can be slow to react and anticipate when holes don't really form in front of him. So he'll miss secondary cutback lanes, because when he sees something available, even if it's closing up, he's probably still going to try to run through it. And if something develops on the backside, he's just got tunnel vision where he's originally supposed to go, where the player's designed to run. So he won't hit those every time. And again, I think I mentioned this, but he's more of an outlet back than a receiver. But I do think he has the ability to be used in the passing game more at the next level if they want to split him out. I saw some decent hands. I think you can do some things with him in the slide, even if you want to put him out wide, maybe even run a couple bubble screens with him. He's got the explosiveness to make big plays that way as well. So I think he can be a really significant weapon offensively. I don't think that he's going to be limited to being like a 2-down guy. He's not going to be someone that you want to give a ton of carries to right out of the gate. But I think after about say maybe about 2 years or so, he can be your lead back. Still more than likely works best in the committee. But he has everything that I think you need to be one of the top backs in the league at the next level. It's just going to take some experience. And as long as he's got the fumbling under control, he's got the ability to be a very explosive player in the NFL. And I gave him, before I get too carried away there, a 77 overall. So another early 3rd round grade.
Yeah, I like Wright. I'm glad we included him in the 4. You haven't heard a lot about him before the combine, and then he put that jetpack on and now everybody's talking about him. But I feel like, I agree with most of everything you're talking about. I do like his vision a little bit more than you do, Craig. I also like how even though, he's not much of a power rusher, he still possesses some pop behind that kind of average frame. Like, he's not afraid to get his nose dirty. And then also it feels like the footwork and the tempo behind the line of scrimmage is something that's really going to serve him well in the NFL. I do like a lot from Wright. It does feel like he's more of a straight line runner. There's some sideline to sideline, but I just feel like he's more, linear than he is somebody who can add on to that part of his game. But this to me, and I know this is maybe it's a cop out and maybe it's too easy of a comp to make, but not in terms of skill set, but I feel like his role in the NFL would be much like how the Saints used Alvin Kamara when they had Mark Ingram, having a 1-2 punch where you have that power back in Ingram who's going to carry the load. But then, his rookie season, you put right on the field to kind of get you some extra yards, put some gas in your offense, get some juice out of the backfield in the run game and in the pass game. So I could definitely see Wright being that kind of complementary piece to just kind of add a little bit of speed to your offense. So I have a 75 on him, but I'm a big fan of Wright.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you guys are saying. I thought Wright was a pretty fun watch, especially after not liking Brooks. I was much higher on Wright than I was on Brooks. So most of what you guys said, I think, was right on. He's I thought he looks like he understands how to set up blocks. There's a good blend of patience and decisiveness there, where he kind of waits for the blocks to develop and then he puts his foot in the ground and he's kind of gone. He is very linear, which you guys said, which I totally agree with. He does have enough wiggle to make people miss in the hole, like not elusive, more kind of slippery, I guess might be a better description. The burst is, once he gets to the hole, the burst is fantastic. And like Craig said, I mean, 2nd and 3rd level, he just runs away from pursuit angles. Like there are no pursuit angles with Wright. If you don't get him in the first 5 yards, those pursuit angles are toast, and you're not chasing him down from behind. I think for the most part, if he gets to the 2nd level and even the 3rd level untouched, it's bye time. He's gone. Soft hands. He's a really natural receiver. I think you can play him in the slot like you guys are talking about. I think I saw him flexed outside a couple times. I might have even seen a back shoulder fade at one point with him, even though he's not terribly big. But he adjusts to the ball well in the air. Flashes the ability to run routes out of the backfield, and he's productive in the screen and the swing game. He's a very willing blocker. He's not a very big guy, but he'll take on linebackers in the hole. He'll put his head down and lean into somebody and pick up a block. The center of gravity is really low for him because he is low to the ground. And the contact balance, I think, is better than it is with a lot of the guys in this class. And he's actually able, he creates enough leg drive that he can, once he gets going, he can kind of move the pile a little bit and get a couple of extra yards. And I think he understands kind of when to take what the defense gives him. There are times where he'll try to bounce the ball outside a little bit too often, but for the most part, like Garrett said, he's willing to stick his nose in there and get his nose dirty when he needs to pick up a yard or two. He's very upright. There are some ball security issues. There are also some issues with him taking some fairly big hits because he runs upright, and he's such a linear runner. He's not overly elusive in the open field. He's so small, you kind of expect him to be more elusive and shifty, but he really isn't. He's basically just a track guy with the football in his hands. Like I said, there are times when he can be a little bit too reliant on bouncing the ball outside. He hasn't shown the ability to stack cuts. He'll make a move in the hole to make somebody miss, but after that, he's not really stringing cuts together in tight quarters. And he'll probably need to be part of a rotation in the NFL. Maybe in a couple of years he develops into a lead back, but I think if he's your RB2 and you've got a guy who can pound people and then bring him in to change the pace a little bit and spread them out, I think that's going to work extremely well, and he's going to be really effective. He's a guy who I think, knowing how the Chargers want to run the ball and knowing what they're going to do with Gus Edwards, I think he would be a really, really good complement and a good fit for Edwards. I think he could be effective coming downhill because he is such a linear runner in a gap or duo or power scheme. He'd probably also be pretty successful in his own scheme as well. He's kind of a slasher and fun to watch. I have a 77 on him. So late third round pick. We're all kind of in the same area, which is where a lot of these guys are going to wind up, I think. But a fun watch for sure.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, Jamie, but we didn't really do it with Brooks. So you talked about the fit with the Chargers for Wright. How do you feel about Brooks and a fit for the Chargers?
I don't think he's a fit for the Chargers because the Chargers are going to be looking to run the ball downhill, and he does not want to stick his nose in there and get dirty. He's looking for the home run on every play. And I just think you need somebody who's a little bit more willing to grind out 2, 3, 4 yards at a time. And somebody who needs to be able to find holes for himself when the holes aren't there. And I just don't think that's where he is. I think what's going to be a draw for him at the NFL is he has basically no tread on his tires, much like Wright. And so he's going to have a longer shelf life in the NFL. But there's just going to be a lot of stuff that he has to work on to be a lead back, in my opinion.
Craig, what about these two?
So I echo the sentiments of Jamie, specifically on Brooks. I think he's more of a wide zone running back. We talked about it again. The tendency to get to the hole and not take what's there when it's not open, looking to bounce it, waiting for daylight. Sometimes it never happens. It's not going to work in a power scheme. You have to be much more decisive. As far as Wright, absolutely, especially in tandem with backs that are bigger, that are more thumpers. You have this change of pace home run guy, so you can set teams up and really like throttle them all game long and just give him, some key touches here and there, especially after you've worn the defense down. And I mean, he's already faster than everyone as it is. Imagine guys being, kind of down to their last breaths, needing, a rest or somewhat taking a swig of water or something, needing a timeout, and just tossing him in there and giving him something up the gut or even to the perimeter and just letting him outrun guys. So I think just in the current backfield, the way the Chargers are constructed right now, Jaylen Wright is almost the perfect complement to what they already have.
Yeah. I think Jaylen Wright is just the perfect fit. Like I talked about, that Mark Ingram kind of Alvin Kamara type roles for both of them, but having Gus wear down in a defense, and then just imagine throwing right out there and just having guys winded and trying to chase him down. I love having guys like Spiller and Gus just start to take some body shots, and then you have a guy like Wright who can just take the big blow. They can have, it's the home run hitter here. I love the fit of Jaylen Wright. I don't of Brooks. They want to run power. We talked about how he's better in zone. The contact balance is good enough for me, and I don't think the vision's good enough for me. I know that it fits in that the Chargers don't need a RB1 next year because Gus is going to kind of be that guy in a tandem, but I just don't think Brooks has the right skill set. And so I'm not with Brooks.
I think on paper you could look at Brooks and say, well, he's kind of a home run hitter. He's got the speed. He could be a good complement to Gus, but I don't think he fits the scheme in particular.
And see, I think with Brooks, he's more, again, I call him more of a smooth runner. The acceleration is there. The top end speed is what I question. I don't think he's a home run guy in that way. So say, for instance, there's a difference between breaking a 40-yarder and a 60-yarder. He can probably get 40, but if it's 60, somebody's more than likely going to track him down.
Yeah, I don't think he's got that top end speed to break it like a guy like Wright would. There was a question in the chat though, and I was just gonna find it, and now I lost it. But basically, it was about how there's a bunch of light boxes in Tennessee. Here we go. From Connor. Do you guys worry about Jaylen Wright having a lot of snaps against weak boxes at Tennessee?
No, not necessarily, because of the force that he runs with once he sees a hole. Like, I mean, he attacks the hole. He knows how to press the hole and get through it. That's the difference between both he and Brooks to me, where if Wright sees any daylight whatsoever, even if it's just a slight crease, he's hitting it, no hesitation. And because he's able to generate so much force with that speed and his acceleration is top tier, he'll break through contact just because of the force he's created behind that speed. So though he's not like a huge guy, I mean, he's only 5'11", 210. I mean, 210 is a decent size running back, but he's not one of those like really, really huge backs that you would expect to really just pound on defenses. I don't worry about him in heavier box situations just because I know that he'll still be able to generate some force behind that speed.
Yeah, I think we've seen enough traits even with light or heavy boxes to know that he's going to have some success in the NFL. I don't have any question about that.
And he might also see more light boxes if he's on the field with Herbert and whoever winds up being his receivers. He might see more light boxes than, say, a Gus Edwards or an Isaiah Spiller would. So he may still get the benefit of some of that at times.
Sure. All right. Next up here, our third running back on the list. I'm putting the grades up for you guys so you guys can catch them when we move on to the next person. So next one up here is Blake Corum. I know a lot of people are making this connection because of Harbaugh and Michigan. So Corum is a compact running back. He really wins with his vision. He's got average burst, but it does feel like there is somewhat of an extra gear when he gets in that open field. It's not really top end speed, but it is enough to kind of run away from defenders for big gainers. He's not going to break off like Craig was just alluding to a little bit earlier with Wright and Brooks. I'm not sure you're not getting a 60-yarder from him, but maybe a 40-yarder. He's going to get caught if it's a 60. In short yardage situations, he runs hard, puts his head down. He gets all the yards he needs on those short yardage situations and goal-to-go situations. A very effective rusher who showed some ability out of the backfield as kind of a check down option. But there is a lot of things that worry me about Blake. And a couple of them are, we talked about how these last two guys didn't have a lot of tread on tires. Corum, they ran into the ground. He had 675 rushing attempts in college. That's a lot. Not only that, he's turning 24 when he hits the football field in the NFL. He's also very undersized, and he's not really athletic. So, it just feels like this is a guy that doesn't have a really, really high ceiling. He goes down on first contact a lot at the line of scrimmage. He can get a little bit of wiggle in the second level, a little bit in the third, but the line of scrimmage saw a lot of kind of bad contact balance, like we'll talk about with a lot of other guys. But he wins with vision. He wins with some of his patience to kind of set up the blockers at the line of scrimmage, but there's that limited athleticism, a ton of wear and tear on that body. And I think the ceiling is going to be pretty low. So for me, it feels like this is kind of a situational RB2 upside at best. Might need to be kind of a short yardage guy to sprinkle in early on. But yeah, this isn't a guy that I'm as high on as a lot of other guys. And we're talking about a lot of tread and a guy that's a little bit undersized. So take that as you will. I've got a 70 on him. So that's kind of a low third, early fourth for a guy like Blake Corum, who I think will have some early success. I think a team will probably run him out and think, he'll give him a competition at RB1, but I just feel like it's going to fade out quick with a guy like Corum. So I've got a 70 on him.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think the things that he does well is he's been really well coached. He understands what his strengths are. So, he does a good job of running behind his pads. He's got a low center of gravity, runs with really good forward lean. So he tends to finish his runs with an extra 2 or 3 yards just by running through contact. He has pretty powerful legs and a low center of gravity that help him play through contact at times. He's got enough wiggle, like you said, Garrett, to be able to make people miss at the second level and in the hole at times. But he's not super elusive. He just has just enough to be able to make them miss in the open field. There isn't a lot of wasted motion with Corum. You don't see the pitter patter of the feet. You don't really see him stopping his feet all that often. And he's not afraid to kind of stick his nose in there and get a yard or two when he needs it. Does a good job of setting up his blocks. The burst, like you said, is good. It's not great. I think he's probably going to be a guy who probably tops out at 15 to 20 yard runs. I don't think he's going to break off a lot of huge runs. He runs pretty good routes. I saw him run some wheel routes, and they designed some passing plays for him in the college football playoffs this year in particular. He's a willing blocker. He really doesn't waste any time getting downhill. I think, like you mentioned, the issues, he's kind of a one direction guy, one cut, one direction, one speed runner. He has to stop and gather to change direction. There isn't a whole lot of suddenness or explosiveness to his moves. The breakaway speed isn't really there. He seemed less explosive after the ACL injury last year. I think the big red flag, like Garrett mentioned, a guy who had, I think, 750-ish touches in 4 years at Michigan. That's a lot of wear and tear for a guy who isn't like huge. You just wonder how long the shelf life is going to be for a guy like that coming into the league at 24 with that kind of wear and tear on his body. Doesn't really string moves together very well. Has a hard time getting started again after he has to slow and stop his feet to make a cut. He's not overly powerful. Like I said, he'll finish runs, but he's not going to run many guys over or break a whole lot of tackles. His success was not really built so much on speed or elusiveness, or even power. He won with vision and he won with volume. They just kept feeding him over and over and over again, and that offensive line broke down opposing defenses, and he benefited from it. Does he fit the Chargers scheme? I think he does. Just he as a one cut downhill runner, I think he's going to do well in a scheme that relies heavily on gap and duo and power, like Roman is going to in the running game. I don't know. To me, drafting him feels more sentimental than strategic. It just seems like it's an emotional decision and not a football decision. So all these guys are kind of clumped together with very similar grades. I have a 75 on Corum, mid third round pick. I'm not sure I would take him that high. I'm not sure I would take him at all. He's fine. I just don't know that he's a lead back, and I don't know what he does differently from or better than Gus Edwards and Isaiah Spiller, that there's a need for him on this offense at this point in time. Like I said, it just feels more emotional and sentimental than it does strategic to draft him. I don't know what he brings that the other guys don't. So that's kind of where I am on him.
Interesting on Corum because, and really it's this class as a whole. When I was going through doing the grades, I realized that some of these guys, and Jamie kind of alluded to it, they have higher grades than what I think they should actually be taken in the draft. It's just based on like the traits and everything that we utilize to create these grades. So you'll find some grades where guys are mid, high third round grades that I don't necessarily think will be taken then, but it's just the way that they worked out. Now, as far as Corum is concerned, watching tape on Corum was kind of like a flashback for me. In many ways, it was watching, like a lot of you guys who've been tuned in for a while know that my oldest son was high school teammates with Deuce Vaughn. He plays for the Cowboys now. Corum reminds me a lot of Deuce. He's sturdier built, and Deuce was more shifty, but they have similar qualities. I mean, aside from being sub 5'8" guys. Corum, no pun intended here, short area quickness is pretty good. Actually, I think he tested really well in the agilities at the combine, which aligned with the tape, more so in 22 than 23 for me, for what I saw, because he lost a little bit of his explosiveness due to the injury. But in a phone booth, he's a terror. It's just when you open up into the wider portions of the field where he gets exposed because he's not that explosive. The further away he gets from the line of scrimmage and the action, the less athletic he looks. So he's just quicker than most guys who are bigger than him within the box and maybe 5 or so yards beyond it. I would say that his vision, I would agree, is probably his greatest asset. What he's able to do to guys that square him up in the open field or pursue him too sharply is kind of comical. Like, probably want to double up on your omega-3s and glucosamine the week that you have to chase him, because I've seen guys on tape, knees are going one direction, upper torso is going the other. And it's just within the box when he's able to create those really sharp cuts. I think his style is, I'm not going to say it's tailor-made for Gap. He just ran a bunch of it in Michigan because I think he could be his own guy too. But it's like Jamie says, he knows his strengths, and so they utilized him as such, and he didn't try to play outside of himself. He used his vision, found the holes, exploited them, and got upfield as quickly as he could. I did like him in the receiving game. I think he has really natural hands, and you can utilize him out in the slot as a receiver, more so than just a guy out of the backfield that you want to use an outlet. So I'm running a couple angle routes into the middle of the field, be utilized a little bit on the perimeter as well. So as far as his issues, I mean, it's pretty clear. Dude's like a juiced up Oompa Loompa. So it limits his long speed and him being able to hold up in pass protection. It's not because he's not trying to give the effort. He's just tiny. And so guys who can build up momentum and just blast through him and destroy your quarterback, yeah, you don't want him out there having to protect if it's not absolutely necessary. Again, it's just by virtue of the fact that he's miniature. And let's be clear, Darren Sproles was an anomaly. Blake Corum does not have that type of speed. Sproles had crazy like leg drive and turnover. Corum's not that level of athlete. So every 5'6", 5'7" or so guy that looks quick in college doesn't necessarily translate over to the NFL. So Corum, again, is not a back that you should be expecting to have these huge broken off 50, 60 plus yard touchdown runs. It's really not going to happen. I think there was some ball security issues here last season. He had like 3 fumbles. So he's got to shore that up. And also, don't conflate making guys miss in short areas with being good, a good runner after contact. They're not the same thing. Like, he can make guys miss before they get their hands on him, but once you do get your hands on him, he's probably going down. He's not going to break a ton of tackles. So that torn meniscus in 22, I would say probably affects him overall athletically, even though, like I said, he tested really well in the agilities at the combine. I still think he's trying to recover from that. The only problem is he's 24 years old. You don't get healthier the older you get, so time's not really on his side. I don't dislike Corum. I like his game. I just don't think it makes sense for the Chargers for the same reason that Jamie mentioned. A lot of his skill set is redundant to what they already have. He's just in a smaller frame. So is he a fit? Yeah, but not with the roster as it's currently constructed. He'll work somewhere else for somebody else. I just hope Jim doesn't feel like he has to make this choice. But with that being said, as far as the grade is concerned, I have him at about a mid-third rounder. I gave him a 76.
All right. Yeah. And in terms of fit, I'm with you guys. It's in terms of a offensive philosophy, I mean, it all fits, Roman and Harbaugh and what they want to do. But in terms of the room, they have got to add some more juice. I mean, why would you take Gus off the field to put Blake in when Gus does everything better than Corum does? So I'm not taking him off the field. I'm not adding him as my RB2 or 3, depending on where you see Spiller. They got to add some gas in that running back room, and Corum is just not that guy. All right. I will post the grades in a sec, but Jamie, why don't you start us off with our 4th running back, and that is Trey Benson.
Yep. So running back number 4 is Trey Benson. He's a guy who, I mean, there are a lot of things to like about him. First of all, Benson has what looks like breakaway speed. I think he ran a 4.39 at the combine, if I'm not mistaken. He's a very natural receiver with very soft hands who plucks the ball out of the air like a receiver. He runs screens, wheel routes, and swings. I think there's probably the potential to put him in the slot and have him run more routes as well. He is capable of lining up in the slot and outside. He showed a knack for back shoulder fades, which I liked. He has really the ideal frame for a running back. He's 6 foot, 220-ish. Adequate lateral agility to make people miss in the hole. He's capable of outrunning pursuit angles at the 2nd and 3rd levels as well. Very difficult matchup for linebackers in coverage. So those are all positives. I think Some of the things that I didn't care for with him were, I think the vision is very below average for a guy who's 6'2", 220. He's built like a power back. He does not seem to want to mix things up inside. If the hole is not there, there's pitter patter. There's a lot of wasted motion, wasted steps, and he'll freeze. Prone to stopping his feet and being indecisive. Does not run with the power you'd expect with his frame. He's kind of a, I don't know, he's kind of a juxtaposition. Like he's huge framed and he should be more physical and take on more tacklers. But he wants to run like a slasher. But he doesn't have the vision or the elusiveness to do that. So kind of interesting what he's trying to be instead of what he probably should be. I don't think he's really going to run many people over or break a lot of tackles at the next level. He's not really willing to grind out tough yards as he should be at his size. He looks timid between the tackles at times. Too reliant on trying to bounce the ball outside to the edge. And there are times when he literally turns his back to contact because he doesn't want to get hit. So there is definitely big playability there. There is versatility there. He is a guy with his speed and his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield who would complement Gus Edwards quite well and could develop into a 3-down back. But I think really the vision and the lack of, I don't know, fight or desire to run the ball between the tackles and grind out tough yards is kind of frustrating. And it seems like he's not really comfortable in his own skin. Like he wants to be something that he's not really built to be, and he's not willing to be the guy that he was built to be. So it makes it kind of a tough evaluation, in my opinion. I think he could be good in a gap or a duo or power scheme. I think he could also be effective in his own scheme. I gave him a 78, so he's tied for my RB1. But again, not somebody that I would want to be RB1 right now with the Chargers, and somebody who I think needs a lot of work and needs to show just kind of an advancement or a maturity in his game that isn't really there yet. So 78 for me.
Yeah, and since we're talking about, wear and tear with a lot of these guys, because it's important with this running back class, not a ton of carries for Benson in college. He had the injury. He had 315 carries in his entire college career. He had that injury at Oregon, then transferred to Florida State. Really good protector of the football. And we talked about it. He can just hit another gear in the open field. So for me, and also as a pass protector, he showed some ability with it, but wasn't very consistent with it. So I think that'll be something he'll need to improve with, but he's got pretty good patience. I think he's got the vision for kind of a gap power scheme for the Chargers. I think it'll be a pretty good fit just because he's got the speed and the burst through the hole. I think he could add some quickness to the running back room as an RB2. Develop it maybe down the road into an RB1, but right now, today for this season, I think Benson is a pretty good fit as a guy that could add some quickness to that running back room. I am just below Jamie. He's got a 77 from me.
Yeah, so Trey Benson is an interesting prospect. He's far more explosive than his frame would suggest. Like Jamie has already talked about this ad nauseum. He's like proof that looks can be deceiving. He has the appearance of like a between the tackles grinder, but he doesn't want to accept that. He wants to be an explosive home run hitter on the outside. When we talk about guys who don't want to accept who they are, we already have a wide receiver similar to that, who apparently doesn't like his taller, not really larger frame, but maneuvers more like a smaller wide receiver. Quentin Johnson, if y'all don't know who I'm talking about. But anyway, this is about running backs. So he transferred from Oregon, and that was a great move for him because I think the trajectory of his career took off after moving on from Eugene. Reason why is because as a Miami Hurricanes fan who's now suffering through like the coaching of Mario Cristobal. Yes, that Mario Cristobal, the same one that treated Justin Herbert like Alex Smith. Yeah, he didn't really understand how to properly utilize Benson before that injury either. So some of his injury kind of, I think, set him back, and the way he was being utilized there as well. So he's the model of ball security. I don't think he had a single fumble in the last 2 years. So gotta love that. And the dude's just built really well. He's got like pistons for legs, and it can make defenders ping pong off of him at contact. So I wouldn't necessarily say he's great at breaking tackles, as opposed to the fact that he's like built like granite. So if you don't angle properly, you don't get the type of leverage that you need to attack him, or if you, I mean, even if you're angling at his legs, you'll probably just bounce right off of him. I mean, he also runs with a pretty decent center of gravity. He can stay low, so at that build, it can make him really hard to square up and tackle and get on the ground. He's a sneaky home run threat on the perimeter, and that often catches defenders flat-footed because they underestimate his long speed. So again, he looks one way, and then you get, if you take the wrong angle, you're going to be looking at him from the side and then behind, and you're not going to be able to catch him. It's just one of those assets that he has that I hope he learns to incorporate into his game a little bit better. It's great that you're really fast, but use that body, man. Use it on the interior. It's going to help you to break those big runs to the outside and also get some explosive runs in between the tackles as well. FSU ran a lot of RPO, but you can still see Benson display like his ability to be effective in both power and zone concepts. So great. He's got that versatility. And I saw some decent reps from him in BPU. Blitz pickup, pass protection, again, whatever you want to call it. So he may not be a liability there at the next level to start off. There definitely needs to be some more work with his technique, though. So I mentioned this already. He wasn't nearly the between the tackles runner that I expected him to be when I turned on the tape. So that was a little discouraging just based on his build. And he seems like his first instinct is to take the handoff and just look for a path to bounce to the outside. It really got annoying because there were some clear running lanes on the interior that he just completely ignored because he just wants to out-athlete everybody to the outside. So he looks like he has maybe like a bit above average lateral quickness, but he's so like tightly wound as an athlete. It might actually hurt him at the next level when he has to maneuver through contact in short areas. So he's not terrible laterally. It's just, I don't know if it's a hesitation or if it's just he doesn't have it in him. Like he's probably topped out as far as agilities are concerned. The footwork looks fine. He just doesn't look overly explosive in short areas. I don't think he scans really well at the handoff either. I saw, like I said before, multiple instances of him missing massive cutback lanes. So I would call his vision like average at best at this point. And I think he's an okay receiver. It wasn't a big part of the game, although his receptions did increase year over year. So he has that to him. So I'm sure that he can develop a little bit more at the next level. And, dealing with some significant knee injuries in 2020. I mean, he basically destroyed his entire knee and tore his hamstring, but it looks like he's recovered well from it. But just moving forward, hopefully he can stay healthy. I like Benson. I think he is a fit for the Chargers just because of some of those pros that I mentioned, as far as his ability to be he has the ability to be a gap running back. He doesn't always run to it. He doesn't always act as he looks, but I think he can be developed in that way. And I gave him a mid-third round grade at a 75.
All right. So Craig, while I get these grades together, while you're already here, why don't you go ahead and talk about your sleeper?
All right, so I went kind of deep on this one. Somebody I really like, Rasheem Ali, Marshall. So I call Rasheem Ali a walking big play machine because essentially anytime he touches the ball, it can be scary for whoever's on the opposite side. Defenders are normally caught compromised because he gets to top speed really quickly. The acceleration, he didn't test. He dealt with some injuries there in the Senior Bowl, so he wasn't able to test at the combine, but his short area quickness and acceleration look elite. He reminds me of a more explosive former Charger. We remember Justin Jackson. They're around the same size and they have similar running style. So he's more of a slasher, but he's definitely faster. So he's a solid one cut runner, really shifty. Like I said before, elite top end speed. And it appears that he has very good to elite long speed. It's really hard to tell because, again, he didn't test. But from what I see on tape, he looks like he's pulling away from guys at the second level. But you also have to consider the level of competition and where he played. So, again, it's questionable, and not testing makes you kind of wonder just a little bit. In 2021, he led college football in rushing touchdowns with 21, and he had over 1,400 yards on the ground. So he was first team all conference that year. He suffered through some injuries in 2022 and missed a whole lot of time. Came back in 23 after dealing with those injuries. Just this past year, had another 15 touchdowns and over 1,100 total yards. I'm also in love with his spatial awareness. and feel for like even the skinniest of cutback lanes. Vision isn't really a problem with him. I think his vision is above average, but also like his patience. He's able to make like really sharp cuts without sacrificing speed, which is a big deal as a running back, because as you can see, like some of the guys that were a little bit higher on, and like say for instance, Jaylen Wright, the difference between both Wright and a guy like Ali is that when Wright hits top speed, it takes him a lot to throttle down and make a cut. Ali can do that without slowing down almost at all. And that's a very special trait to have really as a skill player at wherever you play, whether it's running back, receiver, whatever. Definitely a fit for a zone scheme with the patience and explosiveness to plant and go. I think you can make it work in a power just because of something else that I've seen from him. And I'll get to that in a second. Well, actually now. He's not a big back, but like his demeanor in the red zone goes from slasher to bulldozer. So the closer he gets to the end zone, the more he's all about getting upfield and scoring. So all the cutting and things of that nature go out of the window. And then he says, forget it. I know I'm 5'11", 205, but I'm going to run through you because the points are what matter. 75 career receptions. So instant contributor in the passing game, whether it's going to be out of the backfield or spread out. And again, dual threat back with good to great ability as a return man. So he's super versatile. As far as the cons, he turned 23 in February, so a little bit of an older prospect. Coughed up the pill 4 times just this past year, so he has to shore that up. And again, I'm not certain he can fit in a gap scheme, but I'd be willing to give it a shot because of his explosiveness and the fact that I've seen him become more of a power runner when he gets into the red area. So you can coach him up to do that further out and add that more so to his game. He's going to need work in his lower half because just his base is it's not great. We're talking as a pass protector. He can get taken advantage of by guys who can gain momentum coming downhill with their hair on fire. They can run straight through him. The durability concerns dating back to his sophomore year are an issue. And then he did also rupture his bicep at the Senior Bowl. So there's another guy that if you're going to invest in him at all, you're just going to have to like put him away on the shelf for a bit and hope to see some returns later on. I would have loved to see him test. I know that pro day is coming up here in a few days, so we'll see, where he is, but I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't at all. I have a high 4th round grade on him at a 69. So in the 3rd round, early 4th, I think he has the ability to be closer to like a mid 3rd round guy, but it's just some things I have to knock him for as far as durability is concerned and just not being able to fully see him test to align what I saw on tape with his actual skills.
All right, Jamie, you're up.
So my sleeper is Ray Davis from Kentucky. And after some of these evaluations, I think you guys could understand I was pretty bored watching a lot of these guys, and I was frustrated watching them go down at first contact, not fight for yards, not get their nose dirty. And there is just something about Davis's game that speaks to me. He is highly competitive. He's kind of chippy. And he plays a very physical game. He's compactly built. He's 5'8", 212, something like that. But he's strong. I mean, he fights for every yard on the field. If he comes through the hole and there's a linebacker there, he'll put his shoulder down and run through him. He is really good around the goal line. He just has a nose for the goal line in short yardage situations. He is by far, of the guys that I watched, the best blocker in this class, both in terms of awareness, willingness, and technique. I saw him on multiple occasions step up and take on blitzing linebackers, take on edge players, blitzing safeties, and he's got a really low center of gravity and a really good base, and he steps up and he takes on these guys head on, and they stop dead in their tracks. I mean, there's no backpedaling. There's no getting run over. He just stuffs guys, which is really fun to watch. I think the vision is really good. He understands how to set up his blocks. Davis also exhibits a good jump cut and a stutter step, and he uses a stiff arm to finish runs behind his pads extremely well, looks to finish every run, excellent contact balance. Guys just kind of slide off of him, especially his lower half. Like I mentioned, he'll lower his shoulder and run over tacklers. He's just slippery. Does a good job of shrinking and squeezing through small holes, and also knows when to hit the big holes. Sets up his blocks and sets up tacklers very well. He isn't super explosive. I would say he has more build-up speed. I think he ran like a 4.52 at the combine, something like that. But in my opinion, he plays faster than the speed that he was clocked at the combine. He did show the ability to run away from defenders at the second and third levels. He's probably not going to be a guy who gets a ton of like 60, 80-yard runs, but 20 to 40 yards pretty consistently, which he'll obviously take. He tracks the ball like a wide receiver. They used him in a variety of ways in the passing game. He caught swing passes. He caught screen passes. I saw wheel routes. I saw some fades. And he high points the ball and catches the ball like a wide receiver. And he does a good job. One of my favorite things about him is he can make people miss after the catch. He does a really good job of running to daylight. So as opposed to running to contact at the second and third levels, he'll just have like just a little shift and a little change of direction. It's not super explosive. It's almost hardly imperceptible, but guys will go from having him squared up to sliding right off of his lower half, and he'll pick up extra yards because of it. Like I mentioned, some of the things that kind of hold him back, not overly explosive or sudden. He might not run away from people as frequently in the NFL. He isn't overly creative at the second level. He's more subtle or savvy with his creativity at the second level. It's not something that jumps out on tape. Not sure the power is going to translate to the NFL, but because of the low center of gravity and the contact, he will probably maintain good contact balance. He might have a hard time getting to the edge at the next level, and I think there's some hip tightness there that limits the lateral explosiveness and the short area quickness, and he doesn't always trust his eyes. So for me, I think what I liked about him is he just fights for every yard. He finishes every run, and he's way more explosive than I think people give him credit for. He's not the most explosive guy in the draft by any means, but he does seem to find a way to manufacture big plays. I really liked him. I had a low third round grade on him, 73. But I think he's a guy who, because of his vision, because of his ability to get downhill and kind of slip and slide past people and make people miss, I do think he'd be a really good fit in a gap, duo, or power scheme. His blocking obviously allows you to have him on third down pretty much right away. There's really not a lot of work needed there, in my opinion. And as a receiver, he is a weapon in a variety of ways. I saw him line up out wide. They put him in bunch formations. He played out of the slot, caught balls out of the backfield. They were pretty creative in the way they got the ball to him in the passing game and set him up for big play opportunities. So 73 for me, really liked him. A guy that I would love in the maybe with one of those second, fourth round picks. I think he's just explosive and slippery enough to be a good complement to guys like Spiller and Gus, and the receiving and blocking chops I think are really important as well.
I watched Davis. Did you watch him too, Craig?
Same. I have the exact same grade, 73.
71. Yeah, we were all in the same boat. He was almost my sleeper, but then I went in a different direction. I went back and forth with him. But a running back with contact balance in this class is a man after my heart, man. So I was good with that. So I almost did Ray Davis. We all have kind of a low third round grade on him. But who I ended up going with, and I really don't feel like he's getting the hype that he really should be, is the Notre Dame running back, Audric Estime. If you want a power running back with violent intentions, this is your man. Estime is your man. Another guy who's got really, really good contact balance. It's my favorite in the class. Runs through contact, really tough to bring down. My favorite traits of him is his patience and his timing at the line of scrimmage. He'll set up his blocks. He's got an extra gear in the open field, showed off really good hands in the passing game. Didn't really test all that well at the combine. Went back at his pro day, ended up running a 4.52, which was really impressive for a guy who's 5'11", 221 for one of those bigger running backs. His explosion needs work. He's more of the guy, a kind of running back that needs a head of steam to kind of get going. So at the line of scrimmage, he isn't real quick through the hole. But with that said, he's the type of running back who gets better with volume. Showed off he's got better speed than expected. And this really feels like kind of a souped up Gus Edwards. If you're looking for a transferable running back for the Chargers in the future, for when Gus Edwards is no longer with the Chargers, and a guy who has the body type and the frame and the skill set to take over as RB1 in a couple years. To me, it feels like this is the guy, Audric Estime. He's got the chops, the skills, and the frame to take on a full workload in the NFL. Give him a year or two to acclimate to the NFL, and I think you got a guy here. So right now, I've got a 75 on him, which is tied for my RB2 in this class. I've got him higher than Braylon Allen, Jonathan Brooks, Ray Davis, Blake Corum, Marshawn Lloyd, all the big names that are being listed in this class. Estime is not up there, and he is my tied for RB2. And I've got a really high grade on him, and I'm very high on Audric Estime. So do we want to give our grades? Do you guys have that listed out?
Yep.
Okay, cool. If you've got it, Jamie, why don't you start going from your lowest to your highest? I know because I like Davis wasn't on our list, Lloyd wasn't on our list, but I ended up grading them. If you've got guys like that, feel free to list them out.
So I'll give you my top 6 of the guys that I watched.
Yeah.
So I'll start with my number 6, a guy who I think is a kind of a scat back wide receiver, might have some value in the slot and on special teams, kind of like what they did with Eckler when they first drafted him. And that is Will Shipley from Clemson. He's a guy who I think you can probably get mid to late day 3. He's not likely to ever be a running back 1 just because he's kind of slightly built and he doesn't offer much as a blocker. But he does run pretty crisp routes. He has really good hands, kind of plucks the ball out of the air like a wide receiver. He is willing to kind of shrink and put his nose in there and fight for extra yardage. Not a lot of power, not overly explosive, but good with the ball in his hands after the catch, and can create some, medium to big plays as an RB3, RB2 kind of guy. Not somebody I'd invest a whole lot in. If you can get him like in the 4th or 5th round and find a specific role for him, it could be a good fit. Jonathan Brooks is my number 5 with a 73. Ray Davis and Blake Corum are tied for 3rd with a 75. Jaylen Wright is at a 77, is my number 2, and Trey Benson is my number 1 with a 78.
Greg?
Okay, I'm gonna make mine quick because I'm a psycho and I graded 12 guys.
Okay. Yeah.
So starting at number 12. Sorry, Garrett. I got Audric Estime, number 12 with the 6.
Oh no!
I know some people really like Estime.
I'm one of them.
We can have a conversation about this later on. I don't want to get in depth about that. That'll take up too much time.
All right.
So Estime actually have at number 12, but tied with Estime, next guy up, is Isaac Guerendo from Louisville at a 66. Above him, I'm just going to read it off because it's not listed by number, but the next guy up, which would be, was that 12, 11, 10, is going to be Braylon Allen from Wisconsin with the 67. Rasheen Ali with the 69. And that is what?
9.
Okay, yeah, 9. Number 8, Bucky Irvin out of Oregon with the 71. Number 7, Marshawn Lloyd with the 72 out of USC. 6 is going to be Ray Davis out of Kentucky with the 73 as well. Sorry, 73. I said Marshawn Lloyd was 72, I think. Number, was that 7? Trey Benson out of Florida State with the 75. 6 is going to be Blake Corum with the 76. And a name that Jamie just mentioned that's a bit higher up on my list is going to be Will Shipley with the 77. My numbers are all screwed up on this page. I don't know why. Is that 5? Will Shipley at 5? No, whatever.
Next,
it's all screwed up. The way that I don't know what hell happened with these numbers. Anyway, so Will Shipley we're just going to say he's the 3rd rated back on the list. So I got 2 more. Jaylen Wright is going to be the number 2 back and the number 77, actually tied with the same grade as Will Shipley, just based on how everything graded out, although I still do think Wright is a superior player. And number 1, which again, just how the grades worked out, Jonathan Brooks is number 1 on the list at a 79, although I don't love that. It's just the way my grades worked.
Ooh. Well, I'm happy about my grades. because I feel like they're fit exactly where they're supposed to be. Marshawn Lloyd with 69. Blake Corum at number 7. That was 8. Number 7, Blake Corum with a 70. I got Ray Davis with a 71 at 6. Jonathan Brooks at 72. At 5. At number 4, Braylon Allen at 73. Number 3, Audric Estime with a 75, who's tied with Jaylen Wright with a 75 at number 2. And I've got Trey Benson at 77 with a number 1. And going by these numbers, it sounds like none of us have a second-round grade on any running back in this class, which would tell you, even with our top-rated, Jamie and I have Trey Benson at 1. Craig somehow got stuck with Jonathan Brooks as his number RB1 of this class.
Yeah.
This, in a normal class, is probably your RB, 4 or 5? In a normal class?
Probably.
That's what it feels like. The third-round grade. That's how bad this class is. But there are some fits for the Chargers. We talked about it. Jaylen Wright, Trey Benson, Davis was a guy. I talked about Estime as a transitional piece for Gus Edwards. So there are some fits, but hopefully, guys, that they won't even start thinking about until the 3rd round, in my book. So
4th round, hopefully.
Oh yeah, hopefully they'll start thinking about it, considering it in the 3rd, and then start talking about it, and then really going after it in day 3. Is our hope.
4th round is probably that sweet spot with that extra 4th rounder.
Yep. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Thanks for joining us on this running back podcast for the draft class. We've got linebackers and edge rushers next week. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Salute.